Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Shayna Jacques, and I know a lot of you know me already. Hi, everybody. Um, so today we're going to have Dr. Sadra to do a presentation about aging in the 21st century. So Kiara's gonna do a quick overview of PSS for us, and we'll start right after that. Go ahead, Kiara.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kiara Soto. I am the intake care consultant at Circle of Care. We are a caregiver support program that offers free supportive services to those caregivers who are caring for a loved one with memory loss, dementia, or who is chronically ill. These services include counseling, support groups, educational trainings, advocacy, respite care, and we can also assist with long-term care planning. We do have other services available. If you would like to receive more information on our program or our services, you can feel free to give us a call back at 866-665-1713. Again, that number is 866-665-1713. Thank you for your time and continue to enjoy the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiara. Again, thank you everybody for joining us today. Janet, can you hear me? I know Dr. Sadra is running a little bit behind. So as often, we usually have like started in about 2 or 3 minutes after the time. I think she's running us today right now. If you have any question, hi. If you have any question.
We're all here, Shauna.
Yes. Thank you again, Doctor, for doing this presentation for us today. I know it's a very important topic. So if some of you has any question, you can add in on the Q&A box or the chat. So we'll be monitoring that and answer all the questions at the end of the presentation. As Kiara said, if you have any question regarding our services, you can visit our website at pssusa.org where you find all the resources that you need. And also this presentation will be recorded. If you miss any part of it, you can go back to our website, pssusa.org/resources. And also you're gonna find any other upcoming event or the past one, anything that might interest you. And if you find this presentation important and might be interesting to anybody or loved ones, please share with them. So without further ado, we're going to introduce Dr. Sadra. She is a professor of gerontology and the director of the Center in Aging and Behavioral Research in the Division of Geriatric and Palliative Medicine and at Weill, Cornell. So without further ado, she's going to do the presentation for us, and I'll be sharing your slide for you.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm always a little hesitant about me sharing my own slides.
It's okay. I know it can be intimidating sometimes, but after a while we get used to it. So you just let me know when to do next, and I'll do that. Okay.
I'm going to talk. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for having me, and I'm really thrilled to be doing this. I'm going to talk about how to promote successful, and we'll get into a definition of what successful aging means a little later in the talk, because I know it's kind of a loaded concept. What does it mean to age successfully? And I do want to acknowledge the National Institutes of Health, because they have supported our research for a very long time. Next slide. Okay, so here's some animation. So I'm going to review some very basic information about population aging, and then talk about some of the myths that are still around about aging, as well as the realities of aging. And then I'm going to talk about, as I alluded to earlier, the concept of successful aging. And finally, I'm going to highlight some of the activities that are going on at our Center on Aging and Behavioral Research that you might want to be involved in, or have a friend or a family member who might benefit from our programs. Okay. So if we just, I'm sure we're all familiar with this, but every time I look at the data, it is quite striking. What we're looking at now in terms of a population trend, and this isn't just happening in the United States, it's happening throughout the world, is an aging of our population, especially the oldest old, and why that is significant. Oldest old is usually defined as people 85 and older, and that's significant because these folks usually need more long-term care and assistance. And if we want to look at the top graphic, you can see an increase certainly in people over the age of 65, but also 85 and older. And this is relatively new. If you look at the trend, the line trend, we really started to see a big increase in this group, a significant increase around the early 2000s. Okay, and this line is not flattening out. You can see it's continuing to go up well into 2050. What is also significant, if we look at the bottom graph, is the people in the population who are over the age of 90. So it's not going to be unusual in the upcoming years to meet many people who are age 90 or even live beyond 90 to 100. Okay, next slide. So what are some of the implications of population aging? We like to think mostly in terms of opportunities, because I think a lot of times these are overlooked with older adults. We focus a lot on challenges of aging without thinking first about what are some opportunities. Certainly there are opportunities around productive engagement in terms of work. Many older adults are continuing to work full or part-time in volunteering. My colleagues and I were talking today about a potential research project where peer-to-peer older adults volunteer to help another older adult. Expertise and skill. This is many times overlooked with older people, that they do have a lot of expertise that can be used for mentoring or peer support. And many older adults engage in caregiving and family support, either for a spouse, a child, or even today for grandchildren. Okay. Now, there also are some challenges with aging, and we hope to address these in our research. There are strains on the healthcare system, on social support. A big concern now nationally, especially with the COVID pandemic, is social isolation. This was really came into view during the pandemic, the initial stages when people had stay-at-home orders. So we are doing some research in strategies to prevent social isolation. Living environments, it's very challenging for many older people to have affordable housing. And then of course, transportation. In New York City, it's great. There's public transportation. You can take the bus, the subway, the metro. But in places like Miami, where I used to live, the public transportation is not very good. So people have to drive or use a ride sharing service. Okay. So what do we know about aging? Let's talk about some of the realities and some of the myths. Aging is a very gradual process. It occurs to every organism, and it occurs over time. And actually, when aging starts is the day we're born. If you think about it, when you're 2 days old, you're older than when you're 1 day old. Okay, so this isn't something that just happens when you're 65. Okay, it happens throughout the life course. We also know that this change can encompass both decline. Okay, typically as one grows older, for example, you may need eyeglasses because your visual acuity has declined, but also positive development. Okay, gains in skill and expertise. It's a very complex, multifaceted process. And next bullet. Oops. It's influenced by a variety of factors. Certainly genetics plays a large role in how we age, but other factors, which we call like cultural or social determinants, are also important. Social and cultural factors. We already talked about social isolation. People who are isolated have a much higher chance of having a physical, mental, or cognitive problem. There are behavioral factors. Did you exercise in your life? Did you smoke? Excessive substance abuse, environmental factors. Do you have access, for example, to good, reliable food sources? Can you walk in your neighborhood? So there are a whole host of influences on how one ages. Next bullet. Aging is not a disease. It's, in the United States, it is so youth oriented. I think it's important to point this out. It's a natural process. And because of what we talked about earlier, the variety of factors that influence aging, people age very, very differently. Next. So what are some common myths about aging? One is that older people are all alike. We already talked about that. That's not true. People, when they turn a certain age, don't become a replica of someone else that age. All older people are not sick. They're not depressed and disinterested in activity. Certainly, there are some physiological changes that we'll talk about, but they are a natural part of aging. This other myth is that most people, older folks, live in institutions. In fact, they don't. I think only about 5% of the older adult population is in some kind of institutional care facility. We know from our research for many, many years that older people are in fact able to learn. They are not technophobic. And you do have some control over how well you age. It's not just choosing your parents wisely. Next slide. So if we want to look at some images of today's older adults, you can recognize some. There's the Rolling Stones up on the top, my personal favorite. We did just lose Charlie Watts, but that was due to illness. There's Betty White. So lots of examples of very vibrant older adults who are very engaged in society. Next slide. So what are some of the realities of aging? Certainly today's older adults are better educated, more diverse, healthier than previous generations. They're actively pursuing work, engaging in hobbies, involved in family caregiving, as I've already said. Next slide. Here's just some data to show the educational attainment of people age 65 and older and how it's increasing. If we look at people compared to other years, participation in the US labor force, what's really significant about this is if you look at the bottom line, the dark blue, I believe it is, or black, that represents people over the age of 75. And you can see that their participation in the labor force is increasing. It's not decreasing prior to previous decades. Next slide. There are, however, some changes that occur with aging. There are normative changes in sensory function. Your vision tends, especially your far vision, tends to decline with age. Audition, many older folks need to wear a hearing aid. Mobility strength tends to decline, but we can prevent some of that and have actual gains through physical exercise. Response times is slower. Your response time begins to slow well in, I think, around age 30. If you look at athletes, for example, a lot of them retire in age 30 or 40, and one of the reasons is they're not as fast as they were, right? If you think about a sports player, okay, they can't keep up with the younger players. It doesn't mean they don't have the skill, they just don't have the same physical attributes. There's also an increased likelihood of developing a chronic condition or a disease like arthritis or cardiovascular, or experience some difficulties with everyday routine activities. Next slide. If we just want to look at this, this is some data that just shows the percentage of older folks who have some kind of chronic health condition. And it's not uncommon for people in the later decades to have more than one chronic health condition. Next slide. Also, I think this is very important. Besides the fact that aging is associated with a wide degree of variability, it's also associated with plasticity. By this, what I mean is older folks can experience positive changes in functional abilities. Okay? We know this from the exercise literature, we know this from the cognitive training literature, and from the functional skills training literature. And we really think that chronological age is a very poor predictor of how well someone is going to perform. You can't say because someone is 65 or 70 that they're going to perform in this way. Okay, there are many, many other factors that come into play. Next slide. I just want to show you this. This is from a study that we did called the PRISM study, where we installed computer software. It's up at the top, the home screen. In the homes of People, isolated older adults who lived alone. They were not working, they were not volunteering, they were really isolated. They ranged in age from 65 to 98. They had no prior computer experience, and we taught them how to use this software system. The prison people are depicted in the graph by the purple line. The control group is by the red or orange line. And the whole point of this slide is to show you that these people had never used a computer. And over time, what we saw, the more they used this computer system, the more proficient they got. So clearly, this slide shows that older adults can learn and that they're able to successfully use technology. Next slide. Cognitive aging. This is a concern of many people. A lot of folks are afraid they're going to become demented when they age or get Alzheimer's disease. Cognitive aging also is a very gradual process that occurs as people age. It's very dynamic and highly variable. Next bullet. And it's not all decline. Some cognitive domains do not change into the later years. Some things like response time, we already talked about, declines, and other things improve. Okay, you can learn and gain new skills and gain mastery of new topics as you grow old. And there is a big potential to improve cognitive abilities. And some of our research is focusing on that now. And it's not a neurological disease. Okay, cognitive aging is a natural process. Next slide. So what is cognition? When we talk about cognition, we often think that it's just memory, but in fact, it's multifaceted. You have to kind of click through these, and includes perception. Perception is your ability to recognize objects in the environment or recognize who someone is. Reasoning, your ability to make decisions and think. It's called executive functioning. Your language skills, both spoken and written, are part of cognition. Your problem-solving abilities. And then, of course, your memory. And there are different types of memory that we're concerned with. And finally, attention, your ability to focus or divide your attention between competing activities. So there are lots of aspects of cognition. And this is a very messy slide, and it just shows you what happens to these aspects of cognition. These are general trends. As I said, there's a lot of variability, but what we can see is some aspects do decline. Those we call our more fluid abilities, like speed of processing, the green line, or working memory, your ability to hold things in your memory. But other things like world knowledge and vocabulary, those are the orange and the red lines, actually remain stable or even increase throughout the lifespan. So this is not all a picture of decline. Next slide. And this is a very also messy slide. And the whole point of this is just to show you variability. Okay, if we look at these two lines, two graphs, sorry, the fluid abilities are the things that decline, that crystallize are like language and vocabulary that we already talked about that remain stable or increase. And the solid lines are individual, it's an average. If we look over 40 people, it's the average over 40 people. These averages happen to be over thousands of people. Those dots around the line represent individual scores on these various tests. And so what I just want to show you is that there are some people in their 80s who perform as well as people in their 20s. Okay, because there are a lot of dots around, or individual scores around that. So there is a lot of variability in cognitive aging. Next slide. Alzheimer's disease, this is very different. This is a disease. It's not a natural part of aging. Not everyone, as they grow older, gets Alzheimer's disease. The rate is increasing, or the prevalence, because of population aging. Certainly age is a risk factor. It's a progressive decline. Symptoms worsen over time. We go through mild, moderate to severe. There are behavioral features in addition to memory loss. And if we do imaging, a lot of brain imaging, we can see a very characteristic neuropathology. Okay, next bullet. And actually, there isn't one single test that really can determine if a person has Alzheimer's disease. There has to be a thorough medical history, some neurological testing, including brain imaging, and even some mental status testing. Now they're doing some interesting work where they can detect AD even with some blood testing. Next slide. However, if you have a memory problem or your memory isn't quite what it was, it doesn't mean you have Alzheimer's disease. There are a number of reasons this may occur. For example, stress. We all know what happens when we're stressed, right? We don't pay attention. It doesn't mean we're cognitively impaired. I was walking to work today and I was very stressed out about something, about some work thing, and I wasn't paying attention to the light. And I almost crossed the light when it was red instead of green. Okay. It doesn't mean I didn't recognize red from green. It meant I wasn't paying attention because I was very stressed out. It can also be, you can have a cognitive impairment because of depression, because of some other medical condition, or maybe it's a medication you're taking, okay, or you're socially isolated. So the causes, if you do have some kind of memory impairment, the causes may be reversible. So we always recommend that if you have a concern about your cognition, that you discuss it with your physician. Okay, next slide. So let's talk about successful aging. There's no really consensus on what do we mean by successful aging. It's a very descriptive term. It can mean healthy aging, aging well, but it's really a multi-dimensional construct. Okay, next, got to click. Okay, certainly your physical and cognitive health is part of it, okay, but that's not all. Are you socially engaged? How's your emotional well-being? And finally, productive engagement. In the field of gerontology, we think of all of these elements as very important to successful aging. Next slide. So, and it really, I think, really is about your ability to adapt. Okay? We all know that change occurs as one grows older. You experience losses, loss of family members, friends, partners. You might have a physical impairment or not. You also experience gains. But we think that successful aging is really your ability to adapt to change, okay? Because we know that change is going to occur. It's unavoidable. So how well can we compensate for it, and how can we best adapt to it? And I also want to stress that the total absence of illness is not required for successful aging. That's very unrealistic to think that you're not going to have any disability. I mean, wearing glasses, right, when you're is adapting to a loss of vision. That doesn't mean you're not aging successfully. And here's a great quote, next slide, from Jane Brody, who writes for the New York Times, that successful aging, she really now, Jane Brody just turned 80, okay? And she says that she really understands that a successful life is not necessarily going to be what she thought would be when she got older. She had envisioned something different from herself. But she said, in fact, it is a life that rolls with the punches, adapts to changing circumstances, and makes the best of here and now. And I think that really sums it up very nicely, what we think and how we perceive successful aging. Next slide. So what are some challenges? Certainly ageism. Okay. People not being given opportunities, and a lot of attention is being given to this topic now of ageism. People being discriminated against or not being given opportunities because they're perceived as too old. Okay. Social isolation. We've already talked about housing and transportation limitations. And then, of course, you know, the world is changing, so we have very complex and dynamic technologies that we have to confront on a day-to-day basis. Next slide. So how can we enhance our ability to age successfully, or the ability of our loved ones? Certainly engaging in new and challenging activities. Okay, this is really important. Oh, oh, we skipped ahead. Something, whatever is of interest. That's not a prescription here. Engaging in physical exercise, the data here is very strong. It doesn't mean you have to do the New York City Marathon, but simple things like taking a walk every day, doing a little strength training. Physical exercise doesn't only improve your physical well-being. There is a huge amount of data to show how well that physical exercise also improves your emotional well-being as well as your cognitive health. Okay, so now it's very critical. It's important to remain socially engaged, get adequate sleep. There's also big literature coming out now and has been for the last couple of years on how important sleep is to one's health and one's well-being. I think it's also important to have a sense of humor. You know, my girlfriends and I always say to each other, you got to have a laugh. If you don't have a laugh, life would be pretty dreary, I think. Okay, so next slide. So now I just want to talk to you a little bit about our research at Weill Cornell Medicine. As was said earlier, our Center on Aging is in the Division of Geriatrics, and we're under the Department of Medicine. And we have the Division of Geriatrics has 3 components. They have a large clinical component. We have many geriatricians. It's both outpatient as well as inpatient, and they have a house call program. We have education. We train a lot of junior scientists and fellows and medical students. And we also have a research component, and I'm housed under both the education as well as research component. Next slide. So our whole center is really to conduct research to understand factors that foster successful aging, and also to really think about what kind of strategies can we develop and deliver to both older adults and their families to address the challenges of aging. We are also, as I said, we're involved a lot in training, providing training opportunities for students and junior faculty. And a very important part of our work, and I think giving this talk today is a good example, is we're very, very interested in having collaborations with the community. All of our research is community-based. I really believe that. We have a community advisory board. The director of PSS is on our advisory board because we think it's, you know, we don't want to do research for the sake of research. Okay, our research is applied research, and we really try and make it responsive to the needs of the community and to older adults. And I think the only way to do that is to have an engagement with the community. Okay, next slide. So these are some of our studies. This study we're doing right now is, it's a very nice study. We're concerned about what is the influence of all this health information that's everywhere? How does it influence the kinds of decisions people make about their health? For example, you can get tons of information on the internet about health, right? If you want to look up a topic like you have a bad back or you're depressed or you have a chronic cough, you can get thousands and thousands of websites. Some of them have good information, some not so good. Or sometimes if you're riding the bus or a metro, you see a sign, you have chronic neck pain, do this or call that. If you watch television, half of the commercials now, it's amazing to me, are about medications or some treatment for some illness that are paid for by the pharmaceutical industry. And what we're interested in this study, and it's a fun study, people like to do it, is how does all this bombardment of information, what information do people trust, and how does it influence their decisions about their health? And next slide. This is another study we're doing. They're all funded by the National Institutes of Aging, I should say, which is part of the National Institutes of Health. This study is our Care Partners program, and this is a program that is entirely virtual. Everything is done virtually, and we supply the technology to the participants as well as the internet access through the course of the study. This is a study that's designed to support caregivers, caregivers of people with early stage dementia. And the intervention has a component for both the caregiver, helping the caregiver prepare for the caregiving role, stress management, providing access to resources. And there's also a component for the patient. There's cognitive training exercises, as well as provision of an organizational tool or aid. People, as I said, get a laptop, get access to the internet. And we do 3 assessments, and people are compensated for each assessment. Those assessments, everything now since COVID, most of it was before COVID, but now since COVID, every aspect of the study is virtual. People are we're actively recruiting for this. Everything's available in both English and Spanish. So this might be a program that maybe you know someone who might benefit from it. Next slide. That's what the, one of the home screen, this is the home screen for the laptop that the caregivers get. So you can see these are some things that they work on, for example, in stress management. We have videos, there are one-on-one sessions that are virtual with our trained interventionists. There's a reading list, discussion forum. So there's lots of components of this intervention. Next slide. And this is just another screenshot. Next slide. We already saw this one. So next one. Oh, okay. So what are some conclusions? The good news is that people are living longer. I think that's great news. If we compare ourselves to many previous generations, I really think that there's really, and this is why we're doing our research, is there's really substantial potential for people to age well and for both mental, cognitive, and physical fitness in older age, because we know that if we compare the current cohort of older adults to previous cohorts, they really have shown gains in both mental and physical fitness. There's evidence of cognitive reserve in the aging mind. That means that people can learn even when they're 90. We had 98-year-old people learning to use computers and using them quite successfully. So that's what we mean by cognitive reserve. And I think there are really strategies to master the gains as well as the losses of later life. So thank you very much. And I appreciate giving the talk. Oh, there's one of my Rolling Stones. I love that. He says, Keith Richards, one of the Rolling Stones, was asked about how he felt about aging, and he said he wasn't aging, he was evolving. And I think that's what we're all doing. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. Anybody has a question regarding the presentation that we just, let me make sure I have everything. Share. Here you go. Any question? I mean, I have a question, not really, I don't know if it's a question, but one of the part of the presentation you mentioned about how older adults stay in the workforce. Is this, there's any study, the reason why they do stay in the workforce is on, and then I know maybe sometimes it might be financially,
right.
That's why they stayed, but do you have any other research about that?
Yes, actually AARP has done a very nice report about that. And we've also collected some data on that in some prior studies. And financial incentive certainly is an issue.
Okay.
People are working because they want to maintain their benefits, but that's not the only reason. A lot of people choose to remain working or work in some capacity. It may be part-time because they want to remain productively engaged. They want to still be actively contributing to society. And another thing that we see, in fact, we hosted a whole conference on aging and work a few years ago, is that people do something different.
Yes, they switch,
yeah.
Or sometimes they switch career too.
Yes.
And wants to involve in something else.
Yes.
Yeah, we see that a lot. I just wanted to sometimes clarify, because I know there's a situation that it's not because they really want to enjoy it, but it's because of difficulties also. That's why they stay in the workshop. But certainly they do want to be involved and engage
Right.
in the community and find new purpose, right?
Right.
To do something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions? Any other questions? I know the presentation was clear and it's important for us to know about these things in the community and also find a way for our community to engage in this research because we can see the importance of it. Not only to just have the research and put it there, but also to find ways to keep our community engaged. And then that's why it's important. So if you know anybody or if you are interesting, I know Cornell has a lot, and then especially your department has somebody asked a question, how to join study on reaction to health info.
You can just send me an email or call us. I can give you a number to call. 646-962-7148.
Yeah, I just added on the chat.
Okay.
646-962-7148.
And I did not have a slide up, and I'm sorry, but we have a very other interesting study.
Yes.
And this is for people age 60 and over. It's a study to understand factors that we want people's opinions about what makes older folks susceptible to financial scams, because that's a huge problem.
Yes,
right?
it is.
So this study we're doing, also funded by NIA, it's in conjunction with the University of Pittsburgh. And people come in and part of it is done at home. There's a very short part where they come into Weill Cornell, or if it's at a senior center, we've actually set up at senior centers for people to participate, which is very convenient for everyone. And it's just some assessments of, a lot of people find it fun. You respond to scenarios, you answer some questionnaires, and you participate once a year for 3 years, and you get $50 right there for the compensation is $50. So
yeah,
because these are all in the community and we try and make it easy, either the studies are virtual or people really enjoy participating. And I guess the other reason they like participating is they can see that these studies are actually working on things that they can see as affecting their life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then that's another part of involving in the community too. So that's why usually we try to promote that, because it's another way for them to not be isolated or maybe being included in some research that can be very important for the community. We'll see that. So it's always great to promote that. And then I'm like a good advocate of that. Especially I'm a caregiver, so I can see the benefit of knowing this research and then how can it be a good thing to my mom or to my older family members. So yeah, definitely.
And the last study I just mentioned, the financial, the one concerned with financial scams, that's also in English and Spanish.
Yeah. So any other questions? I know you will send me the information. I'll follow up with Susan, and then we can just still promote those research. I want to say thank you to you, Dr. Such. It's always a pleasure to work and collaborate in presenting this important subject to the community. If anybody else have any questions, and if you miss any part of it, again, it's being recorded and we'll be posted on our website in a few days. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good holiday season and
everybody
stay safe.
You too. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.